Interrupting the current neo-coronial cricketism to bring you Behind the Woodshed. This is Crickitude Busting episode BTW RLM 377. What do I say from here, folks? It's been going on and on and on. We've had it in our hands this entire time to stop the entire thing globally. Just make the inroad, and we haven't done it. We're amazed to look around. All the people that I understand are doing research, finding the very same thing I've been saying all this time, that it has failed. Essentially, you could just go right to the fact that there is no test to any of this. And then I come along, and I'm so absent what day it is, I didn't realize we were like in an Independence Day weekend. No, your dependence in is what she is. That's the quarantine, or the semblance of the oppression upon you under the name of COVID, and no one throws it off. Great. Fantastic Independence Day. No, it's Interdependence Day, just like you're being told, and you have no control, even though you have all the control. And so I don't know what more to kind of come here to say. I explained exactly what's going down. The transition is happening. As I was working with some people, because there's some mask, well, they're not even calling it mask anymore, it's face coverings, and we'll get to some of this stuff. Face coverings that you put on, required so-called, you'll find out there's no requirements at all. And the problem with this, moving from, like I was saying, going from the habeas to non-quarantine, you can get out and about but use a face mask, is that it's much harder to do the habeas where the court, the Bar Association, helping to implement and promoting this thing. How do you say that? Well, because they promote sustainable development. Well, how is that connected? Well, go look at Agenda 21, go look at the back guideline, go listen to broadcasts that I've done behind Woodshed for a decade or more, and it'll explain everything that's been going on and how you're being guided into a point. And I just look at the so-called Independence Day. Yeah, you're independence. That's right. You're not non-dependent. Think about all this stuff. And why aren't you stepping up? Why do I hear people wanting to go to guns, or we're going to go fight other people, or we're going to go and rally and wave a flag? It really doesn't matter. But every governor turning, if you look around, you see every governor turning into a Chinese agent, locking down people where there is no test, or those governors believing the common cold could do more, and even the people agreeing with the common cold could do more than make people seek a sniffling, the sneezing, coughing, aching, stuffy head fever so I can rest medicine, or you too have to be Corona commies, Corona Chi-Coms, Corona criminals. They're adopting everything that happened in China. Since when do United States laws ever come into effect here? And there's nobody that's in the seat of decision in this country, United States of America, that did any different than what the Chinese did. Where do you think you live on this Independence Day weekend? And who do you think you are if you're not going to step up and do what it takes? And so doing what it takes, I've been talking about what you have to do to get this thing to work. A couple of main actions that you need to do, called actions in the equity, and I consider the habeas, though it's a root constitutional remedy, to be one of those equity things. And then you have the injunction. And in the UCY.TV comments of YouTube, thank you very much for the comment, it makes a link to someone I don't know. I don't go to the links. I'm kind of afraid to go to links. I don't sure what they're going to do. So I go really slow. I try to protect my system as best I can. And with a comment there, David Sands says go to a website link, but then they say this, which is instructive. File, relative to what I was talking about last week, what do you do? File a Form 95 and sue them. I want to point out that is something that is available. But a Form 95 is for, as I understand it, a Federal Tort Claims Act claim. Federal Tort Claims Act claim is not a suit in equity. In fact, the form requires you put a damages value in money. Equity claims don't necessarily mean money unless you research deeper, and then you can understand how money can be part of it, but it's not part of your claim. And so, while a Federal Tort Claims Act is something you could do, it's not what I've been suggesting is required up front with this thing that's local to each one of us. Remember, that's federal as well. This answer has to be going state. And so, it's a tort action, and it's not the actions or methods I'm suggesting to do at the state level here for you to make that record and the violations at the state, which are determined relative to the remedy, which the federal tort claims is not really the standard of federal standards, as I've told you. This tort claim is available, but it's not preferable in these COVID circumstances to do anything. And remember, the federal standard of how they determine your case will give state deference, the power, absolute power, as we've heard in the recent Illinois cases. So appreciate the comment, and that we have another remedy that you can put out, but I'm really not talking about a federal tort claim at all. And you have to be careful on these things. And I don't know what this Form 95, it seems to have a life of its own. It's really just a notice, and it's not required. Now, it will give you guidance. As I've said, go to your state's habeas corpus sections and see what the form is. You can copy and paste that in and see what they want you to say, and then analyze it very carefully for what you're telling them the statuses that you are and what they've done, and whether or not that form is complete for your needs. And so, again, thank you for the comment. I just want to caution, your remedy is deciding the proper remedy is all important in what I'm saying, and how you get at it, and what the overall condition is that you're speaking to. And so that's, really got to listen fairly closely to what I've been saying. And again, we can discuss all this, email, you can send me the email, whatever, you can get in the chats, not necessarily the chats, maybe the YouTube chats where I can kind of go back and see it sometimes. During the broadcast, I'm not looking at too many chats except for the one over at RLM, and that's just really behind the scenes. It's just a little corner of my screen. Anyway, so we have to if there's a question on any of this, we definitely have to get those worked out. What your harm is first, and then what remedy you're gonna seek, and then the why behind it. And the why behind it, why I've been saying the habeas, where you have a solid way to say your liberty was restrained without warrant. And that liberty could be even you going out, although I haven't found the courts too willing to entertain that. You can still go for that. It makes it harder and harder. You want to do it that way because the burden is on the government, not you. When you do every other action, you have to prove it. And so this is you got to really look carefully here. So also last week something happened, and I'm looking right now. My encoder's cut off about a minute and a half soon. I haven't been able to find out why that happened. It even cut off the file recorder, which I pull to repost. So anyway, just want to let you know that was whatever happened, I haven't been able to figure it out. I was cut off early. That's why last week's broadcast was cut off early, and so anybody that's taking the feed and simulcasting, I apologize live for that, but I try to adjust all that in the post-production where I can patch that problem up a bit. Today I'm going to have to make sure I keep looking over at the encoders to make sure that they don't cut off early. And going on here now, also a couple weeks ago I made a comment about the honeybees. I wanted to touch this. I've been doing some research a couple years now, just looking at this problem. And told you that this year we had a real serious problem with the people that I talk with relative to the honeybees. And this is not, I don't want to get into the colony collapse thing. I'm not talking about that. This is just really essentially the honeybee health is kind of like indicative. It's like canary in the coal mine type of thing, maybe. And looking at that and looking at what's going on and what man does in overall kind of condition. And then now we get into the concept. I told you that the honeybees are having trouble this year, and a lot of these, I guess I would have to say non-commercial, this is a critical observation to make and keep. The non-commercial people were having serious trouble. In fact, there was going to be, it sounded like early in March and April, there wasn't going to be many bees to be sold off to hives that were dying off. I was getting reports that people who had been in beekeeping for 20 and 30 years were losing most all of their apiary to whatever. And I noticed when I was listening to these stories that we're looking at what apparently is a feeding problem, pollen feeding problem, and a nectar feeding problem coming in fall. And it happened over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and it's slowly getting worse and worse. So I made the comment that the bees are doing better. Well, it wasn't 2 days after I made that comment, we get the news, like AP News, U.S. honeybees are doing better after bad year, survey shows. Well, I reconfirmed what our discussions were with my colleagues about this, and they confirmed again to me that in the Northwest there was a honeybee problem. And I'm noticing, as I've been noticing more, the pollinators are dropping here. There's something going on. I don't want to get all too wild. I just want to point out that whatever we're doing and whatever's going on, there's a real, tangible, production-related, on the boots on the ground problem, potentially, going on, that the commercial beekeepers may have been reporting that things are good, but we're having looks to be a little bit of a problem. And it can change over the year depending on the type of plants and the feeding and all that goes on. My observations have been there's been a very low turnout of bees in places that I used to see them growing. So I don't know. It's an interest of mine behind the scenes of looking at this. I've been wondering, what do we do? Where's the real problems at? Again, if you get this problem misidentified, then you may do things that are harmful in other ways, in other capacities. It seems to be now my focus in lots of things. If you get like climate change wrong, which you did, or you get the COVID wrong, which you did, then you're going to be doing things that are going to be detrimental, in maybe directly to us again, or to the collateral damage that happened. So we did, right after I said that we were having trouble with the honeybees, a report comes out to tell you all the honeybees are fine. That's a commercial thing. All the non-commercial guys that I was understanding were having trouble this year. Whether that's rectified over the summer, I don't know. Once it warmed up a bit, and this was across the world, it seemed, then it started to normalize out a little bit. But whether that's going to work through and in through the time period where there's not much pollen and nectar coming through here going into fall, I don't know. But anyway, those of us that have been paying attention are a little, I'm going to say concerned, but it's, because I'm not, let's see, nature's nature. Nature's going to do what it can and what it will. Again, our response to it is, I think, an important acknowledgement of what's going on, and not imposing ourselves on it at first before we look into it is important. I guess I'm saying that because it seems to be, that's a natural, we're dealing with nature there, and all the methods that I apply in the unnatural legal thing, in how do we address problems and make sure we're dealing with the correct problem and use the right thing. If there's something to use, that's another decision. Do you use anything at all? It's seemingly applied across nature to this. So I guess I'm saying, for me, I'm feeling comfortable enough to continue to tell you that we take a natural mind to what's going on, the law of nature, we apply it to the unnatural, the forced, and we still will be able to be doing things pretty well. So anyway, I made a statement that there was a honeybee problem. The next 2 days later, they said there's no honeybee problem. I went and reconfirmed there's been a honeybee problem, at least in the Northwest. Whether or not that's rectified, we'll see. But this was all the people that are non-commercial as well. And the commercial side has a lot of money to throw at something in order to correct things relatively quickly. And so we've got to be careful not to be careful of the standard that we're using to measure what's going on as well. Again, this is the thing. I'm going to keep saying, it keeps relating. That's why I'm even talking about this. The measure, the studies, the information, the data that's being used, the models that are put through, the action that is taken, this is all consistent of being critically focused on making sure that you're not making a mistake when you apply yourself to a problem. So one of the problems that we have, and then going to the courts and the legal system, as I've told you, and why the habeas becomes interesting and why equity actions become interesting, is because even though those sit in the decision of the judge, they really are dictated to the judge by the facts that you place, and the relative rights and the things that are violated. And in fact, in an equity injunction side, which I don't agree to do first, you may have to, but the habeas really is where I would like to see people do what they can, if they can frame the unwarranted restraint on their liberty correctly and apply it. When I say correctly, it's no threat. All they're going to tell you is no. If you do it incorrectly, you can do it again. But it's just, you want to do your first work first best, right? I mean, you just want to get that forward. But we are up against this Bar Association problem. In fact, I think it was Gary L. asked me what the organization was the government goes to impose A21. And Twitter's a little bit of a confined space for me. I'm not so sure I understand it all the time, but I gave him back an answer. I think he was actually after the ICLEI organization that I put down second, but the imposition was, I said, was the COG, the Council of Governments. I said it was the university system inside your government right now. We're talking about Independence Day and being free. No, these agencies are right inside your states, and they've been taking you down for decades. And then the final one was the Bar Association. The Bar Association, we know, promotes all this nonsense. And then we have another level of corruption on top of all that. That it's the courts are corrupt, and when it's kind of like you say, well, why do I have you go to the court? Well, again, it's making that public record, and you make it nice and clear, and you don't bog down your matter so that everyone can start to see it, because everyone works on ill-perceived conditions that are not relevant to, and it causes people to essentially be insane, as far as I can tell, that we are up against a main corruption within the system itself, and there's lots of apologists about it. Like I told you about the cops. I'm done with all that. I've been done for decades. When they decided I'm an innocent man, and when 5 cops decided they were all going to try and shoot me dead, I realized who I was looking at. It was the criminals themselves. That hasn't gone away for 30-something years now. The judges are the same. I found out that they're the same. They're just different the way they're the same. And so there's a problem we have with addressing this. Well, it comes out, and again, it's not just saying, oh, see, they're corrupt. It's identifying the system underlying that allows the corruption, and regard the futility in it, because once you can identify too and speak to the futility, because you'll be challenged with why you didn't exhaust remedies, so to speak, you have to have just a couple of sentence points to state here's this and this and this. And you provide evidence of those things, whatever you think you can get away with in number 5, 3, whatever the things are, the bullet points, with the proof, and you say, to address these so-called commissions that oversee this occupation is futile. Once you bring in futility, and you've got it proven, now you start to plug up all the holes that they've let themselves, the trap doors they've given themselves to escape. And that's just one. There's quite a few, and it takes a while to figure out where these are. Why I want to work with people if they're willing to, if we can look at the condition. We want to plug the holes as we go. Anyway, so now we have a story. Now Reuters is telling us, and this is really just to say, oh, we're doing our best, but and we're catching some people, we have a problem, but we're on the case, when in fact they're really not. Thousands of U.S. judges who broke laws and oaths remain on the bench. Judge Les Hayes once sentenced a single mother to 496 days behind bars for failing to pay traffic tickets. The sentence was so stiff it exceeded the jail time Alabama allows for negligent homicide. Margarita Johnson, who was locked up in April 2012, says the impact of her time in jail endures today. Johnson's 3 children were cast into foster care while she was incarcerated. One daughter was molested, state records show. Another was physically abused. And I've talked to you over and over about this organized criminal syndicate that the judges really can control, and that's how I figured it out back in 2005. I've talked to you all about this. This is not even new news. What I want to point out is Reuters is coming out to tell you there are bad apples, so-called, in the judicial system. They will tell you that they can go through and that they have these judicial conduct commissions that are on the case. If you look at this and don't just laugh at it, if you want to control these people, you have to point out, not necessarily these stories, that there's a system that allows this, that then tries to undermine or protect the rest. In fact, the appearance of impropriety should have done it, not the act, and they have fallen short of that they're all, for the most part, the majority is the Bar Association itself, and continues. This is like the Pope in my mind, and the pedophilia that goes on in the Catholic Church. It's been going on for 2,000 something years, whatever, or 1,000 something years, and it never stops. It's the same thing in this Bar Association. People need to step up and make the record of this, and don't expect to go anywhere. I've stopped going to judicial conduct commissions. I did that a long time ago. I realized it took a while to figure out how this thing works. So I don't do anything anymore that wastes my time. because I've done that, I can make a list if I wanted to focus on this. I can say it's futile what they're doing. And the continuing harm was supposed to be checked. And you start to build a case more than just your blanket complaint. And people don't like to even hear me say this. They don't want to do it. None of this. But this is where it happens where we're going to have to be a whole lot more concise on how we discuss this. The failure to be concise is how they're getting COVID to keep you all continually down. This article that I have it talks about the negative side of people recognize this is not enough. You can start there, and you can start to build the case against the condition, the system, the commissions that are set up that essentially protect and highlight only a few, but that the penalties don't even rise up to what you and I would do. And I just look at that and say, well, that's the occupier treating its own a little bit different, so you're not equal under the law. In fact, you're a different status. And this is not, I can just say that, and it's not just the Bar Association, it's anybody that has a control that allow to control you, even when you say, how crass do I get here? Go away with an expletive. That doesn't cut it. So there's now a judicial comprehensive accounting of judicial misconduct nationally. This is where you can start gathering this stuff up. You qualify that the information was accurate, but then you bring in the fact. Be careful not to focus on those that are sanctioned, because those are the ones you leave out. They say, oh, the other judges are great. No, they're not. And we know that they're not because they're tied to a system of promotion that's foreign to the United States. And this is what we sued out in 2013 and got it again by the rule. See, the judge couldn't even step into our case. By the rule, we were able to get we got the default, but the system, which is Bar Association members, covered up the record, and the clerk helped. And so now we have a record, but we have no one looking. So if no one's going to look, the lone voice in the wilderness is what we become. And the rest of you are dependents in this weekend, instead of independents or non-dependent, more likely staying separate and know not to evade, but how to avoid the authorities. So I find I was listening to someone who was prior to me on UCY, people talking about evasion. Why are you talking invasion? Why are you creating isms and ists and ians when you just avoid? You want to talk about the jurisdiction, you're not in the jurisdiction? Just show that it doesn't apply. It's pretty simple. Why are we making up ists and isms and trying to define the world when it's already defined? That you have to have a power. You have to have an authority to come after me, and if you don't, that's a crime. I think that's the simplest answer. But here we have judges will do what they do when they're enforcing certain things. And I don't want to get inside. There's a rationale behind what's going on and the COVID and all this economic plunder and the protection that's coming in that's really wrong to the property owners as well. But when you have a court, I told you this e-government, this e-court is not due process. It allows for all kinds of problems. It is how they're going to go, and we have the evidence here, and through Zoom on top of it, which we found is just faultier than heck. But Zoom call eviction hearings, woman says they'll throw everything I have out on the street. Well, in one regard, if you're not paying your bills, fine. You're not paying your bills. You have a contract, you should be evicted. Now, some of you have been through Fed actions, so FED action, not Fed, but FED actions. And I told you my involvement with that. I was a real estate agent who attempted to throw me off a piece of property. I was one of 5 properties I was managing in the absence of an owner having to leave the country. It was actually my job, a contract I had with the owner, to have to manage these, and a real estate agent came in to try and kick me off in an FED action. Well, I did a lot of research. That's that little red property book I had, and in there I found out that there's no law without property. I found out what the law was supposed to do and what it wasn't supposed to do in that one little passage. Well, the FED action is supposed to be for, what is it? I don't even know the status is here. Landlord, tenant? Well, I wasn't a tenant. And so I found out I had a license, and so I answered a FED action with that I had a license. I didn't get treated the same at that point, but there's still corruption. So instead of being kicked out in 3 days because I didn't have well, there was no monthly contract. I was doing a contract. There was no monthly contract for rent. There was a contract for property management. And therefore, I had a license to do what I'm doing, and I was providing the service under the contract. They couldn't just throw me out. No, I had to go into court, and I had to face my accuser, so to speak, and we had to face the judge. And I put the judge in positions based on what I'd learned about the license that they'd never seen before. Surprising to me, because I thought all these judges were supposed to know the law. The point is that there's hearings for these evictions. This imposition fraudulently by the courts, by the government, including the courts, have put people on the bitter end, likely not to this lady's fault. And this is where, again, you start to see maybe I can apply, and I would say I shouldn't say maybe you could apply, that the condition was not yours, nor the landlord's, but it's caused by a fraudulent imposition of the government you have no remedy for. See, that's an injunction statement. And so you could withhold that, and you could put yourself in a different standard. But the point is they're using Zoom in eviction hearings, and if you don't have access to Zoom, is my point on this one more than any of it, if you don't have access to Zoom, you will be found against because you didn't so-called appear. Is the danger I told you about when Washington cut out their courts and you don't have a civil government for remedy. Now they stick it e-government, e-court, and if you don't have the technology, you're out. Or at least until this gets challenged. Now I'm going to show you about, not show you, but I've explained about your phones. You are moved right now because you won't stand up against the fraud and the cause that they put in all this imposition on your civil establishment. The Republican, if you can keep it, you're not keeping it, and so they're instituting the next international encroachment, which is e-courts. And if you can't have the technology, that's just like you not having the mark. And so keep up with and keep engaging your phones, and this is where it's going to go. And you're not going to be able to have a court because no one's fighting for them, even though they're manned by corrupt people, and this judge allowed that to show you and prove to you that. Now you say, oh, well, if it's corrupt, I don't want to get involved. Well, it's all corrupt. Now what are you going to do? You're surrounded. This COVID showed you literally live in a prison in your house. You now have to deal with the insane believers of this psychopathy that's come put down upon society. You're not free to move about the country now. I don't care what your opinion is on any of this. Interestingly, I'm looking for a cause. I'm looking for standing for myself. The area I live in is not putting up with it. I understand third hand, fourth hand to me. A clerk was getting all over some people for not wearing their mask. The response to the clerk was, do you own this place? The clerk said no. And then the customer said, shut up and give me my change so I can get out of here. People aren't putting up with the rest, so there's no standing here where I'm at. They're not putting up with it. And a lot of other places too. What I'm saying is the incremental imposition is still there. When you need to go to court, you will need necessarily where they shut down your courts because of this fraud called COVID-19 without an infectious agent. And we know that, and even if there was, we know that because there is no test, is being told to you right here. You're being imposed by e-government. This is a bureaucratic, technocratic plan to move bureaucracy in and make it look like that it's law. Okay, again, this due process is being killed here. Why? Because none of you have property and you never assert it, so they continue. Because without property, they don't have imposed law. There's no law for you to use. You've got no property. When you have property, now they have to have the law. When they come up with this and you say, but I have a higher right to have an appearance and you can't do this for the fraud, now you have a statement. Now, this is a weaker statement because you don't have the right if you have a violation of your contract of tenancy. And so you have to sit back with this one. My point here, again, that the woman did not have access to Zoom. She failed to appear, and therefore she could have she could be literally thrown out in the street on this. And I wondered, now it kind of answers why the governors are putting this moratorium. Completely violates property for both. I mean, both people are being violated here. But these actions are taken based on a fraud that the governor or the government themselves have imposed. And I hear crickets to that imposition. And during this time, and this is older news now, almost over a month maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Here we have people being thrown in the streets for no fault of their own, actually. Their livelihoods have been interfered with. You can't even access the courts. The government's closing its doors unless you want to go through the e-government porthole. And we have this story coming out. Campfire. The PG&E pleads guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter for negligence in California's worst wildfire. And we can go through and we can read this and we can understand. What I would look at this is 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter for negligence. Now you think that everyone's treated equally in this country in this so-called Independence Day? Yeah, these people are independent of all liability. Are you okay with that? You say, no, you're not okay with it. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do about it? What forces are you going to draw together with you to stop something like this? Do you think the PG&E is going to be put in jail? No. See, this is all a commerce system. Money pays for that. Does it pay for you? No, because they put you into a different status, and it's more like what? The serf, the slave, the thing you all thought that Lincoln stopped, the thing I keep telling you about, it's still working. And we have evidence of how this is working today. You're treated with exactions of every kind without limited liability. That's not equal treatment. It means something else is over this country, and it has been for a long time, and everybody's been waving flags and fighting for tons of time and not realizing it's not what they thought it was. Boy, what a massive duping. It just blows my mind. But at any rate, California Utility Pacific Gas and Electric has agreed to pay out a fine of close to $2 billion for causing a campfire, the campfire, not a campfire, but the campfire, a blaze that killed dozens of people and destroyed the town of Paradise. The judge overseeing the case, Michael R. Deems, has set aside time for people who lost loved ones in the fire to make statements at the hearing which could last for several days. So they get you to go ahead and put your soul on the record of a thing that they've already going to be paying money, $2 billion. I don't know if those families can ever be compensated, and I don't even know if that money even goes to them, because it goes back to the public, who then gets to be taxed to pay for PG&E to go and do it again. Okay, so I don't stop on that. I just want to point out 84 manslaughter. They agreed, and they're not going to get kicked out of their stuff. No one's going to take PG&E and put them in the street and put someone else in the place. No, but you don't have Zoom. You don't have Zoom, folks. What is that? What did I say a long time? I wrote the home of the land of the fee, home of the slave. I think I wrote way back before 2000. At any rate, here we go. And this comes up. What do you think this is? When I talk about exactions, every kind of, did you say the number? Did you go back to this? This is pivotal. It's pivotal for anybody with a thinking mind when you see this finally. When I finally came across this, again, decades ago, and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. My mind wouldn't accept it for a long time. And I mean, maybe like a couple hours. Well, I'm thinking, what am I reading here? What am I reading here? This makes no sense. But it makes perfect sense when you have the right mind. It makes no good sense when you listen to what you've been told and fed all this time, the feed they give you that they call as knowledge and education. Once you strip yourself of that, you start to see better. What's the statute I've been kind of touching on here a little bit when I talk about slavery, the continuing slavery, the exaction and extortion, exactions of every kind or extortion, wrongful assessments as well, and that's okay, that's law, that's equal rights. And yet you look at something like Campfire and PG&E causing 84 deaths, and they get to continue. They don't get thrown out in the street like the woman did because she didn't have Zoom. It's not equal. But what are they talking about here in Title 42, Section 1981? They're talking about what? Extortions of every kind, aren't they? I've been pointing this out for since I started broadcasting. Until you really get this and see this, you won't understand probably what I've been saying. You'll just, write it off. You'll think that, okay, well, that's the condition we're in. That's enough. I'm not going to do much with it. And yet you'll complain about it. You'll even say pledges to it, wave flags to it. PG&E is not treated equal like you and I. If I went out and made committed 84 acts of manslaughter, once they caught me, I wouldn't be able to pay $2 billion or promise to pay, given there's no money anyway. No, I'm going to be treated pretty directly as a direct, non-limited liability interaction with those that have the power to force that on me. Anybody that, and here we have today, we talk Black Lives Matter. If you don't know, again, the hype, I'm not going to go off onto that. You don't know what's been going on, and finally someone makes this issue about, wait a minute, one of their things is, Black Lives Matter. Well, what about everyone else's? And then we hear people will come out and stab you in the eye if you say all lives matter. How about I'm not going to say any of that? How about if you just back off and learn as a Harvard professor, you shouldn't even have that in your heart, let alone that you're teaching other people that. But at any rate, what's going on in this country? How is it when you go to Title 42, Section 1981, you see things like the freed men and women that were freed at the time, that act was put into place in 1868, shall have the same rights as the white citizen, which shall include extortions of every kind and no other. What's being said there? Here's a little link that came across my way this week through Crypticon.com. White slaves, privilege they erased from history. Until you all start understanding, and in this case, this video, she goes right through the list of all the stuff about white slavery. And it was actually worse for white folk. It's not to put one above the other. Until you people, all you all, figure out you're all together to be exploited, then they're going to use every other division to keep us from getting together to stop them from doing it. Forever. It's going to continue as it has. Here's white slavery. You can go ahead and listen to it if you want. I just got the link. It's a video. I'm just appalled. It's historic what's been going on. Had a friend not even 2 days later tell me, I've got a book, talks all about that. Big, thick book about white slavery. So as we go through this and we have all this Black Lives Matter, I call it nonsense because it's politics. It's a stalking horse. When in fact we're all slaves. The freed black men and women of the day were recaptured underneath federal authority and given rights as the white citizen. Go read it. It's in the law. It's not my opinion. Title 42, Section 1981. And you all will have extortions of every kind applied to you equally. Go read it. And the people that came from through doing that are continuing to be your masters. If you think white slavery ended with this country, United States of America, you need to look a lot closer. And so for me, I just see that I don't like to see the division. I don't like to see people fighting. I don't like to see the strife. I do know that those that want us to be divided will foment that at every turn. And we keep letting it happen because we believe we understand what's been the past, and we believe that we have the best understanding of it all. And what I see is we haven't a clue. And my background came from a pretty suburbanite background. There was all kinds, if you will, races and types of people, all kinds of us. All different cultures, all coming together, having a great time in the streets, having a great time before COVID, before any of this nonsense. Never had a problem that I can think with anybody unless they were a jerk or just a criminal. We all got together, and all of a sudden now there's this division. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I look at it and I see we're ignorant people. I look and see we're an ignorant people that we've all suffered the same things. Then you either get right with that and understand we're all in the same prison. And somebody has put themselves in the place that they can say that they can put the exactions of every kind on you. Or else you're going to stand up and just, for all of you all, will stop it. And I've been advocating for a peaceful return. Try not at all costs to go to the Second Amendment, because I think if we do it, the more, I hate to use the word higher, but the more moral way, get back to the more moral principle of it, we'll have grown and fortified ourselves as people as the example to show that we're not going to engage in the past that's continued for us to be here. So going on here, white slaves, privileged and erased from history. Go ahead and believe what you want to believe about the propaganda today, the promotion today. Keep yourself divided, or else you start learning that everybody has been equally imposed. And the Title 42, Section 1981 will tell you that. And yet I see no speaking of that by any of these stalking horse promotions at all. And I certainly do not get the coverage on this at all. And I certainly do not get the thumbs up or the just to tell other people listen to this, or the advantage, or the sending of the links. We get no statement out of this through a broad spectrum of the internet forum that we can communicate in, and we continue in our little cloistered ideas of what we think is going to work and what we think is going to happen, and how those over there are different than we over here, and all that is a false front in order to get you to feel the way you are, and to get you to focus your energy on that instead of the cause. And I'm been really big about finding the proper cause that's causing your harm. And when you get on the proper point, whether or not I agree with this, because this is agreeing to something else, the people that get into these political movements will vilify you when you even try to say the proper stuff. Scholar forced to resign over study that found police shootings not biased against blacks. My problem with this is that he didn't find a problem with the shootings. See, the cops, these enforcers, these occupied power, it will shoot everybody equally, apparently. And that's what this fun. But no, if you got a special view that you think you want to have more wounds than the next group that's having wounds, you need to rise to the top of the bottom. No, you're going to vilify people that come out and tell you something. Apparently, when the scholar made the comments that there was no found shootings biased towards blacks, he was vilified. He decided to resign from two places that he was at, I guess extracurricular to his professorship. He hasn't lost that yet. But that was a problem. The system had to throw him out. You got to keep the cause to keep the division. In fact, police shoot everybody, is what I got out of this one as well, but that's not what the story was talking about. So for me, I don't care about the distinction. I see that the action of the police, the military now, those that will not suffer what you will. PG&E won't suffer like you will. The cops won't suffer like you will. The judges won't suffer like you will. In a nation that professes to be equality under law, has got to be the biggest duping I've ever seen in my life. And to continue even after I've been broadcasting for over 10 years, it's phenomenal just to watch this. At any rate, so the scholar that steps up and says the cops shoot everybody was vilified for not saying that the cops found to shoot blacks instead of being exalted to show, yeah, you just said that cops shoot everybody equally. That's the Second Amendment. And we all look at the Second Amendment, that's the Title 42, that's your equal rights. We all look at that and say, wait a minute, since when are we supposed to all suffer exactions of every kind? How is that equal that we want? Who are these people that do this to us? And then look at that and turn our gaze back out to united in looking and stopping our oppressor. Because I don't know, my experience in life wasn't one of strife amongst types of people. My view wasn't ever like that. Do you think I've had problems with people? You bet. Did I cast that on any quality of someone as a class? Absolutely never. This never occurred to me. Everybody by their own deed or non-deed, I guess. But all of a sudden now we've got to be arguing over who gets beat down and killed more by the cops instead of saying, wait a minute, the cops shouldn't be killing us. And isn't that how this so-called thing was supposed to have started with the Floyd matter? Anyway, moving on, because I don't want to get into all that. We got bigger things to be after. Now, I kind of avoided the corona thing. I talked about it, mentioned it already a couple times. I'll move into it right now because a lot of stuff is kind of moving and dynamic. It's still the big story that we need to know that is in control of what's going on. And it's the thing we need to focus on, because I think, again, I've been thinking real hard about this for a lot of weeks. This is the thing we can use. Unlike any and all other things, and the reason why is because the fraud is so complete. And so easy to, see, I avoided it, Vince. It's easy to prove. It hasn't come with any cloud having to prove this out. And so with that view, we have something we could move right now. That we're not is really an astonishment to me. That we're not shows me that we're not an educated populace. That shows me that we were educated in things we don't need, and I'm not immune from that. I've had to do a lot of hard work to get to what I feel is a more proper view on what we're having to deal with. And at a time when it's really coming up that we can use what I've been observing, at least as like I said, the starting of the trailhead to the path that we need to take. And we each may have a different style one to take, but in this matter, it all has the same base. It's fraud. It's easy to prove. Fraud that then infringes on your rights, and it's unwarranted. Certainly fraud vitiates everything that they're doing, and it takes away your property, it takes away your rights. If you don't think your property's been taken by this COVID, look at the Zoom. And the judge saying, you don't even have a contract here. You can't show up on Zoom. That defeats all of your abilities right there. You don't have a digital Internet of Things connection. You no longer have a life that we will recognize. You better really rethink what you think you're looking at here, on where this thing is being driven underneath this fraud, to tell you we can shut it down. Well, now it's coming out. They want to keep the dust up going. They want to keep pointing fingers, and I don't know that, I really don't, I deleted so many COVID tabs. I'm getting tired of really talking about it, especially when not many people are going to respond, and I'm watching a nation of people being sucked into the stinking abyss by their own accord in inaction properly. And so I go, what am I going to talk about this for more? I'm having that discussion again. This is becoming more and quicker every time. Why do I keep talking? Why do I even waste my breath? It feels like a big waste of time. And yet, I don't know. There's something that says we could do this in the next moment. China never reported existence of coronavirus to the World Health Organization. Comes out a promotion that says we're trying to focus the harm on China. What did I open up the broadcast with? That if your governors in the United States did the Chinese lockdown and didn't utilize any, and I'm in the adding here, didn't utilize any of the statutory due process required, how are we to blame China when they didn't provide the due process protections in the United States? Is the focus now on trying to blame China that it never reported existence of coronavirus to the World Health Organization? Let me just off that title, folks. What is the coronavirus but the common cold? Would we expect China to report the common cold to the World Health Organization? And I want to focus on this condition. As soon as people really get what I've been saying for months and months, in fact, it's coming out, there's news here that the common cold is now being counted on COVID. No kidding. No kidding. How long have I been saying that? How long have I been pointing that out? And that's the fraud. That's part of the main, you can go on and on about the fraud, but that's the problem. The common cold. Why would China, if you're going to point a finger, why would they report the existence of a common cold to the World Health Organization? They wouldn't. What came out was it was presumptive that was COVID, SARS-CoV-2. That, I think, came from the United States imposition. So again, that focuses a possibility and probability that this originates out of the United States, which for those of you in the United States should be really worried about, because that means that they meant in earnest to hurt you. Anyway, I could read this, go on, and when you apply the word coronavirus, COVID-19, and what they really mean, you'll find out that China had nothing to report. in particular where, it was the worst flu season in over a decade, which they knew since the end of November. So there's a movement on of one of the factions of information trying to blame China. My problem with all of that is that the United States, at least for the United States, the governors, the public health authorities, the counties, all the authorities, the judges, everybody had a certain due process to follow. None of them did. And essentially they became what China we saw was astonishing thing to lock down millions at just a declaration. Where the United States did the same thing, what's the distinction between the United States and China? When every one of the governors did the same thing, where's your independence? It's certainly not evident in this matter here. And so we want to blame China. We want to call it the China virus. None of which. It shows you both parties are playing a game, and you're allowing it, you're buying into it, and you allow it and buy into it, even when you just deny it's anything and don't respond against it. In fact, this is the best time to be able to do that. It's just, I can't see how much easier it would be to resolve this. And so let me move on now with this. Let me show you that I told you this before. I told you Trump could have stopped this. He didn't need to engage it. And it comes out again, and John Rappaport now talks about it in this regard as an option that China can have had if they're looking at it as some masterminding control, global control, how they were running this, playing this 5D chess. He's got this whole thing going. One of the actions here of which he writes this too. The virus hounds from CDC and the WHO, not the Rock Group or the OWL, but the World Health Organization, the Chinese government could have said to this virus, quote, yes, we have a little outbreak in Wuhan, nothing serious, nothing unusual. We have people coming to the hospital with flu and pneumonia. About 300,000 people die of pneumonia every year in China for all sorts of reasons. In Wuhan, the elderly have major health problem owing to the air quality. Pneumonia. We've been working very hard to fix that. At one point, we were going to build an incinerator to burn the waste in Wuhan, but we discovered the technology would have created more pollution, so we abandoned the idea. We want to come up with a better facility, and we will. We're sensitive to the needs of our people. John Rappaport writes that as one of the options that could have been stated. It's exactly what I told you Trump ought to have done when he knew, because it was reported back in the end of November, that we were in a serious influenza season, the worst in a decade. He could have said the very same thing. John Rappaport identifies this, that China could have said that in his presentation to say maybe China's got this as a 5G chess game to take advantage. I'm not going to go that far. You can read his stuff. It's great stuff to read. You can think about it. He's got good stuff to tell you. I want to point out that what I told you back in, March, maybe, February? That President Trump could have ended this and by saying that very same thing for here, and the governors could have stated the same thing, and they didn't. And yet it's not just the idea of some guy behind a woodshed 6 months later to have come up with that as a strategy. Even as a strategy to avoid the problem. Tells you there's something else going on with this. And I say that becomes more the imperative on fighting it. And because it's such a fraud, it's easy to out and identify. There is no authority in it either. For anybody that's afraid of this thing, there's just no authority in it. And let me point that out, because here we have another thing coming down as this governors don't say it was just the flu season. No, they want to invent COVID without the infectious agent. And you know what I'm going to say? Because there is no test. There is no test for an infectious agent to support anything relative to what? Not even a thing of public health concern, let alone an epidemic, let alone a pandemic, which was never declared. Remember, very carefully, not only did China not say the common cold was a problem, But the WHO never declared the pandemic. They declared and characterized this situation as pandemic, did not change their prior assessment. And so we're all being used to help along and aid and abet a tyranny against all people in the world. Every one of you. Even me, if I can't get something, well, I'm actually helping, but it's not a direct thing. Like I told you, I don't have standing. I'm looking for some way to jump in. I just don't have it. And if I don't have it, I'll be kicked out. I'm just kicked out that quick. And so here we go. The rollout of this. Now you'll see the adjustments has been going on as they listen to people. They adjust. This is the parasitic amoeba in your life. Oregon government news detail. Face covering requirement applied to indoor public spaces take effect on Wednesday, July 1st. And the story I told you about, the thing I was told about the interaction between the store clerk and the customer, that happened the day after, I think. This thing supposedly went in, but did you hear it? Face coverings, not masks. They're not focusing on masks. Governor Kate Brown announced today that Oregonians statewide will be required to wear face coverings in indoor public spaces beginning this Wednesday, July the 1st. The guidance applies to businesses and members of the public visiting indoor public spaces. Can I quit now? Not only is it not masks, it's only a guidance. My other thought on this is it says indoor public spaces. Isn't Walmart private? And so, lots of hedging words here, but we're not talking masks, we're talking face coverings. The Lone Ranger's face covering come to my mind pretty quick. Oh, but they go on to talk about face, nose, and mouth. Well, give me back up here. Back up. What did I say about that? It says the guidance applies to businesses and members of the public visiting indoor. What? No law? Guidance? Guidance, folks. Guidance. There's no authority. Modeling from the Oregon Health Authority shows that if we don't take further action to reduce the spread of the disease, our hospitals could be overwhelmed by COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations within a week. You notice he didn't talk about infectious agent. Just the title. Anyway, enough. Here, I can go again. We go paragraph, sentence by sentence on all this. Face coverings, not masks. Guidance, not law. So what they're doing is they're getting you to fight amongst yourself at the private property areas that you believe is a public property because you see lots of different people there. And it doesn't apply at all. I gotta tell you, a thought just came to my mind. I understand, I've been told, some of the cops in Oregon are just saying the governor, has no right to interfere with my civil liberties, so she can take her face covering order and put it on her face, I suppose. So here we have no authority right there. For those of you that are a little bit hesitant, there is no authority for what they do, and they know it. This is not a law. This is a guidance. This is no different the guidance the CDC gave to the states, that they weren't supposed to take more than as a guidance, and were supposed to do their own assessment to find the infectious agent. This is no different than the pandemic suggestion that the CDC accepted from the WHO that was not even a pandemic, but characterized as a pandemic. That was all suggestion. And we find out by that one doctor, as I reported, the suggestion was really the suggestion to go from containment, where the outbreak breaks out, into epidemic, and move to mitigation. That's all that really means. And then we come to this. Face coverings? Really? Then we have this big convolution going on about whether masks or not to wear masks and all this, and I've already told you months and months ago, the masks aren't going to help you on this one. Like I said on the internet, the Twitter, I said, I'm still waiting for the experiment to be done where you put a chain link fence to stop a killer beehive attack. That's what the masks are going to do relative to this thing. And so we have here a study done, I think it was in 2015. Here, listen, the governor just said face covering, not even masks. Here's what they say. The study happened in 2015. The rates of infection outcomes were highest in the cloth mask arm, with a rate of ILI, which is influenza-like illness. This is kind of what we have, right? Flu-like symptoms. the infection outcomes were the highest in cloth mask arm, with the rate of ILA statistically significantly higher in the cloth mask arm compared with the medical mask arm. Cloth mask also had significantly higher rates of influenza-like illness compared to with the control arm. An analysis by mask use showed the influenza-like illness and laboratory-confirmed virus were significantly higher in the cloth mask group compared with medical mask groups. Penetration of cloth masks by particles was almost 97%, and medical masks were 44%. And this governor is just asking for face covering, like the Lone Ranger, I guess. The study in this first RCT of cloth masks and the results caution against the use of cloth masks. This is an important finding to inform occupational health and safety. The federal agency, not you, moisture retention, reuse of cloth masks, and poor filtration may result in increased risk of infection. Further, research is needed to inform the widespread use of cloth masks globally. However, as a precautionary measure, cloth masks should not be recommended for HCWs, healthcare workers, particularly in high-risk situations, and guidelines need to be updated. But this governor believes, this empress without clothes believes that a face covering is sufficient. Another report. I want to keep just looking at this. Up to you to decide on all this yourself. I've said, in fact, I've said exactly what that said before. Never read that thing, but you have to consider that you may even want if you have a regular medical mask, you may want that 60% coverage, or 56% coverage, even so. So be careful on just dismissing this. But they're not covered. And face masks that aren't made to do so and fitted properly are 97% leakers. Non-pharmaceutical measures for pandemic influenza in non-healthcare settings. Personal protective and environmental measures. Go down through the discussion. We did not find evidence that surgical type face masks are effective in reducing laboratory-confirmed influenza transmission. Again, influenza, not common cold. I don't know that there's much different. The point is, they're dealing in something that they normally will declare a pandemic on. That's what the studies were for. This coronavirus, as the WHO, the World Health Organization said, is unprecedented. They've never seen anything like this to do that. That's why they didn't change their assessment. But at any rate, reducing those masks, did not find evidence that masks were effective in reducing laboratory-confirmed influenza transmission, either when worn by infected persons as source control or by persons in general community to reduce susceptibility. Susceptibility is your ability to receive, right? I've been saying you make your body as strong as possible so you're not susceptible. However, it goes on, as with hand hygiene, face masks might be able to reduce the transmission of other infections and therefore have value in an influenza pandemic when healthcare resources are stretched. All this conditional use. They also go on, and I don't remember now where I read it, one of these studies admit there is no known and it's uncertain what the basic transmission mode and mechanisms are for optimal measures. What did I just say there? In fact, these uncertainties over basic transmission modes and mechanisms hinder the optimization of control measures. How can the due process that was required, that when the governors declared the emergencies, they had to do things that stop the spread. When they don't have a test and they only have a presumptive belief, how can they know certainly to do a certain thing that will stop the spread? Isn't in evidence, and the Ohio court that we read said that makes those decisions arbitrary and capricious. I would suggest they're probably deadly. Again, we're doing the wrong thing with the wrong idea. This report here says that there's uncertainties in the basic transmission. Not only do we not have a test for the infectious agent, we don't understand, and there's never been the test to show how it goes, what the transmission methods are. And they admitted that, or imposed upon China, that it wasn't known early on, wasn't it? They're making up, they ascribe certain things too, but this study says there's complete uncertainty over transmission modes. How is anything being done then going to stop the problem? And we have a problem here then. Why is it being implemented? Based on I'm suggesting to you how you address this relative to what the law wants to see in an arbitrary and capricious manner. They didn't. Not only do they have no test, they don't even know transmission modes, so they don't even have a basis to tell you to do anything, even if the masks didn't cause the problems that they do. No one has died from the coronavirus. The high-profile European pathologist is reporting that he and his colleagues across Europe have not found any evidence of any deaths from the novel coronavirus in the continent. I think this kind of came through a few links. I responded, I think it was to Barman, Grimner's website on Twitter, that said, coronavirus died from the common cold? Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. But what I found fascinating about this article, they can't find deaths from a novel coronavirus. We already know that doesn't exist. And if there was no test for it yet anyway, and still. And when I read through this story, I was kind of feeling pretty cool. As I read through everything that they mentioned in this article now, so many months later after you heard it from behind the woodshed, was stated here. And so I'm feeling pretty doctorial at some level. Just call me Dr. Woodshed. Everything I've suggested to you was a problem, and really we turned that into the basis for what the government was supposed to find alternatively, the fact of, to show that they don't even have a basis on top of the failure to certify. Is in this little article. Now, I guess the point is, yes, I'm not a doctor. Neither is the guy behind the woodshed, I guess. You can give it to our little fictional character. The point is, you don't need to be to look at reason. You don't need to have a critical mind on this. All you had to do was pay attention to the deception, how they were doing it. Then you can bore in real quick on how it's going to be, and that there is nothing, whatever it might be. I told you this in the watch out for the needle in the haystack here. Whatever this thing is, if it's something, you can't find it, you can't see it, you don't even know it, you actually can't prove it did anything. Can't be the basis for orders that created a lockdown, nor can provide authority to make mitigation measures, such as wearing a face covering. That's before you get to the fact that they're actually maybe deadly to do that. They actually will cause worse trouble. Specific SARS-CoV-2 genetic elements found in different insect species. Now I know why a papaya can measure positive on an RT-PCR test, right? Specific SARS-CoV-2 genetic elements found in different insect species. You can read this article. It gets kind of complicated, kind of beyond what I want to put the time into. When I found out that you can find SARS-CoV-2 in all kinds of insect species, I started to wonder, maybe this is just something in nature. And how did they identify SARS-CoV-2? There is no test. Oh, they go genetic markers. That hasn't been proven to do anything. And how can it actually be a viral thing if it's the elements of it are in other species? You think maybe it's easy to get from a bat to a people? Well, I think we have some evidence in this article to show the tests would necessarily come out positive, even if you test a papaya. Makes sense now, that other article that I read a couple months ago, that the king or whatever, the ruler of that one Malaysian country said, here, test these other things, and they all came back positive, not being people at all. At any rate, so here, specific SARS-CoV-2 genetic elements. I don't even know how they identified SARS-CoV-2. Actually, they look at genetic sequencing. They're common. Makes sense why we see positives everywhere, notwithstanding just that the antibody test is not looking at SARS-CoV-2, proving it's not a test. CRISPR, okay, now we move on to where they're moving with this. We're looking at elements and genetic elements that they keep splicing together and looking to go look for remedies. And this one last article was to look for, maybe we can find insects that'll give us some therapies that we can use against this thing. Well, it might be more ubiquitous in the nature than we thought about. And they go through that article and they tell you how much they don't know. It's likely things, or it's probable stuff happens. All this other stuff we don't know. This is a vast chasm of stupidity and ignorance acting out. And I told you a long time ago, when they started chopping up these genomes to try and create these life forms, we were going to be in trouble. And when they broached the idea of going into people, to do this with people, that without really knowing anything about the technology or the adverse consequences of it, that we were going to have some serious problems, and that it was no longer a restriction against using the technology to try to manufacture babies. We have now the report, CRISPR, and it was going on without our knowing. CRISPR gene editing in human embryos wreaks chromosome mayhem. A suite of experiments that use gene editing tool CRISPR-Cas9 to modify human embryos have revealed how the process can make large, unwanted changes to the genome at or near the target site. The studies were published this month as a preprint server bioRxiv, I guess, and have not yet been peer-reviewed, but taken together, they give the scientists a good look at what some say is an unappreciated risk of CRISPR-Cas9 editing. Well, you've heard that behind the woodshed for years now. They will continue to do this. I just want to really point this out. They're not stopping because it's a so-called human baby. They're gene editing babies with technology they don't know. They're making vaccines, is where I want to go with this one, with the same problem. And they don't know. And there's no ethics to stop it, as I told you before, is our real main problem on it. There's no restraint anymore. We lost that years ago. And nobody stepped up to start becoming more principled and to put their foot down, draw that line on in the foundation, the rock, so that they wouldn't be taken down as people. They're finding out that here, there's another article you can read. Scientists edited human embryos in the lab, and it was a disaster. As you heard me predict behind the woodshed, just based on what they just don't know. If they can't identify SARS-CoV-2 and test for it, what do you think they're meddling in embryo editing? And they is our problem. And this is the same nonsense, mental instability that runs the governments now. You think it's the government that's doing it. No, these are insane people in government that are doing this. An insane woman is in Oregon who thinks that now a face covering is something that's going to stop her problem that she invented. And so, this is our world now. Despite the fact that you now pull all this evidence I'm pulling together, most people with coronavirus won't spread it. Why do a few infect many? That's not even proven. See, how can this article say that? This is New York Times. They're admitting that the common cold isn't spread by people, which we know that it is, otherwise it wouldn't be common, but that the coronavirus, as you think it is, this deadly killer, that spread, remember the Princess Petri dish cruises, is spread by people. It's not. It's not being done at all. That's another condition. But why do a few infect many? They can't even say that in an article. Why? Because the other study showed and admitted they don't even know the transmission methods. And so we can take and pull information for our minds to feel better and at ease. We can also use it, if we're going to get engaged in the right way, to utilize it as a source of authority to show these lunatics in the seats of decision, these governors across the United States of America, absolutely have no science that they even understand. And you take together all these little stories and just highlight the certain passages You build them up in a simple little paragraph statement that reads that these people don't know what they're doing and they're harming people, whether that's to kill them because of the wrong care, or whether that's to take their livelihood, or put them in a condition now the government now moves based on this fraud to e-government where people don't have e-government. This is like India. You think this is the Banana Republic or worse? This is like India moving overnight to take away money, went to digital currency, and no one had all the poor people had no access. Now, why is the country United States doing that? Why did the governors of the United States adopt China as their model? It's not an Independence Day celebration in my mind. And yet I heard the bombs going off all over last night. Most people with coronavirus won't spread it. Of course not. They're probably immune to it. It's the common cold. They're going to get what they're going to get. If you're not susceptible, like hopefully your health is up, you're not going to be doing it. You're not catching it. If your body's dealing with it, it's going to likely throw a positive, because your body's dealing with it. Doesn't mean you're going to, then you're going to be asymptomatic. Doesn't mean you're going to give it over. This is what was kind of a joke to me. We're talking about transmission. Because it jumps on you, gets in your body, just because it jumps on you, it's not like it bounces right off of you and then goes to someone else. Your body has to go through the details of dealing with it. Depending on how your body deals with it will depend on whether or not you become another infectious source. For the common cold, we don't know what more to do. It's just going to pass through, we'll get done, and be on with it. The common flu, maybe influenza, maybe a little bit more detailed because it's a little bit harsher. But most people don't spread the common cold is a lie. They do spread the common cold. As far as coronavirus, this deadly thing, no, you don't spread it. And there's no test to be able to do anyway. And why do few infect many? That's not provable. And from a doctor on the Twitter, if you want some more how to solve this, because they're going in a direction. We know this direction is moving because as you see e-government, and you're going to be thrown out of your house if you don't have a phone or the access to the Zoom, which they all control, and it's hacked up. I mean, that thing is just a failed system to start with. If you think you're going to get some treatment that works, no, they're going to stop the treatment that may work. It looks like it could work. You saw the FDA just do that. This thing is going down the track of a plan, however word you want to place on this thing. It's the incrementalness of the global structure. Why your governors are looking like China and India to implement things you're not ready for and under dictatorial powers without due process. And you sit there as crickets. But the Dr. Didier Raoult, who has been on the forefront of the hydroxychloroquine use, despite the FDA banning it. And I will point out, and I'm not advancing that this is the cause, that this is the cure. I'm saying this may help. You better keep this in your mind. Whether or not you can get this in the United States for this, I don't know. But there is now a study out, has been, that the treatment of hydroxychloroquine with that azithromycin and combinations showed spectacular results in diminishing the rate of death, what rate there is. It's not near what they've been saying. So I'll give you a link to his site, to this study, the treatment of hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and the combination in patients hospitalized with COVID-19. Remember the title. Anybody that had a few symptoms were thrown in with this title. They found out in a study that was not, if this is the right study, if I remember right, this was paid for by the hospital itself, that they showed a distinct difference, that hydroxychloroquine reduced the mortality by 66%. They have different roles. I don't want to go through it. If you want to understand what you might do, alternative to what they're feeding you, as what needs to be done, here's a link that you can go and do. He has a follow-up tweet that he put out just like within the last day or two from Portugal that actually shows in their study that hydroxychloroquine, relative to what they call SARS-CoV-2 infection, and getting past the fact there's no test, but whatever they thought they were fighting with the pneumonia-like condition, hydroxychloroquine was effective. Hydroxychloroquine sulfate in particular was effective, and it could be used as a prophylactic. It would make you less susceptible to get it. So while the FDA in the United States wants to ban it for your use and your doctor's use, more importantly, interfering with your private care with your doctor, the other parts of the world are more objective in their analysis to show you that, again, not a cure, but as a potential treatment if your body is susceptible to these things. Obviously, an improvement of the death rate, the mortality rate at 66%, there was some that were not responsive to the treatment. Now, they also said, as I told you before, way long ago when I first talked about this, it's been shown, and this is not hard to find, for as much as I'll criticize Wikipedia, they said right there in that you have to use hydroxychloroquine very particularly. And the study they did, they made sure that they were dosage related to the cause. They made sure they didn't make any mistakes. And so I want to point out here that depends on how you develop your test, on what you're doing, your study, and what you're checking can make or break the outcome of something. The hydrochloroquine can be found to be effective if your body will receive it, like other things. And so here we have secondary opinion from those that are making the decision in the United States of America. They're wanting to keep what may help you away. Why? Because if we look at the plant, it looks to be the goal, and they've already declared they want to get to a vaccine and pharma, and the dollars that it presents, nothing that costs 4 cents a dose is going to be brought forward. And so this is what these agencies are doing to you. Again, exactions of every kind. These slaves, remember, you need to go read it. I don't really talk to about it because people flame up. The rights given and bestowed in Title 42, Section 1981 were the same rights given to the freed men, the freed black man and woman. They literally were free for a moment in the country United States. Why they didn't go run to a state and develop their own land right then, I don't know. But they were invested with rights as the white citizen. And those rights were to pay exactions of every kind. And when you finally get that understanding, you'll understand the dynamic when you find out that there were white slaves. They were likely every one of us. And that's how we're being treated. We're being treated as animals, farm animals, property of someone else that can be treated in any way, treated for whatever they want to do. And you're watching this coming out where they retract something that could be 66% effective in order to go test something that's never going to be safe and likely going to be a problem, in particular where they do the RNA and DNA genetic vaccines that have never been tested. And I have, again, John Rappaport talking toward that. And what is he mentioning? But the problem, what they're trying to say, it doesn't change your genes when they do this, but he has the evidence stated from people that are in the business that, in fact, these new vaccines will do this. And in just paraphrasing a part of it, the first human trials based on this strategy, called immunoprophylaxis by gene transfer, or IGT, is underway, and the several new ones are planned. Now he's saying this is 5 years ago. IGT is altogether different from traditional vaccines. It is instead a form of gene therapy. Scientists isolate the genes that produce powerful antibodies against certain disease and then synthesize artificial versions. The genes are placed into a virus and injected into human tissue, usually muscle. John Rappaport's bold-faced punchline, here's the punchline, quote, "The viruses invade human cells with their DNA payloads, and the synthetic gene is incorporated into the recipient's own DNA. If all goes well," big pause, "if all goes well, the new genes instruct the cells to become manufacturing powerful antibodies." Close quote. So instead of giving you a treatment that is, for some people, 66% effective, or for a class of people, 66% effective, we don't know the other things that one may work. The combination actually was 71% effective. For the other 25%, we may have to find something else, but they don't want that only costs 4 cents, or maybe $5. You know, capitalism and all. They want to change your gene structure through vaccines. That's why the FDA banned that. Had to be. And so we see the progression this week as I started to look through this, even for as many COVID-19 tabs I just deleted. I wanted to show you, I'm not talking just about the COVID-19 and we can attack that. It's that there's you're being shown in the news cycle, so to speak, exactly the progression of what's going on, that they've had this plan, what they want to do, where they're going to drive this thing, and as long as you're not responding, they're going to go ahead and impose all that. And my thought has been, if you don't respond to the easy stuff, like a habeas, and assert yourself there, when it gets to more complicated things like this next thing, you're completely out of the ballpark, completely incapable of responding to it. Where we now see, what did I say, treatment not for 4 cents or even $4. They want you to do pharma injections, DNA, they want to change your genetics. I've told you this a long time ago about how this was going to work against your little ones. And then we see this today during this imposition of a fraud called COVID-19, the disaster without an infectious agent, the transmissibility of which is completely uncertain, if not just unknown. Colorado adopts mandatory vaccines for children. If you don't think that's targeting the children, there it is in the title. Since the arrival of coronavirus, the common cold, the use of a familiarity with vaccines has dramatically increased, prompting a more aware and questioning public. Okay, you're questioning, but you're not responding. What's that light on those tracks I'm standing on is not dealing with the light coming down on you. With little more than 48-hour public notice, many Coloradans were enjoying a brilliant Sunday afternoon as the State Senate Health and Insurance Committee was squirreled away in the confines of the state capitol to approve the School Entry Immunization Act, also known as SB 2163. Fascinating they didn't do e-commerce here like they did over there in Oregon. One of the main complaints was some senators, they couldn't even get into the building unless they got on Zoom and had their e-government. And he says the senator was saying it's completely inadequate. Well, and I've already told you that my colleague already found that out in just a normal county meeting. It's completely, e-government is complete fraud on the idea of a Republican form representative interaction type of government. While on Sunday afternoon, a Sunday afternoon may not seem an appropriate time for a legislative body to accept witness testimony or conduct its legislative business unless there is a clear intent to limit public participation. That kind of strategy has a way of boomeranging with the loss of public trust and confidence. Yet the Democrats had an intensive legislative urge to codify SB 163 with as little public input as possible. Let me just get back to that. The loss of public trust and confidence, they don't care. And they don't care because you're not actually coming back with anything. They don't care because you're not caring to respond. They don't care because this thing has gone beyond law. It's now just running to the end zone. And until someone tackles them, they're going to run. And they're running like the wind right now. And so, Colorado adopts no less, mandatory vaccinations for children. If you didn't think that what I've been telling you about child rights, and they're using the child as a stalking horse to attack your children and put you on the outside of that, and that they don't care whether or not the common cold was a fraud to impose the need of a vaccine. They don't care that the theory is only for 95% and they didn't make a provision. They don't care about what your philosophical beliefs are. They don't care about the science. They don't care about whether your body or your little one's body can receive that without harm. They don't care. And you don't care enough to stop it. This in spite of the children have zero chance of dying from COVID. Remember, COVID is coronavirus, not COVID-19, the flu-like symptoms disease label. Dying from COVID, but are harmed by for life by social distancing, which has its roots in a CIA torture techniques. If you don't think that these people that are in seats of power are after your children, and in the worst ways, even to describe your children, no less, as enemy combatants, to put them in torture that was identified through the CIA as techniques that it would use. I couldn't believe that. I had to track it down. I did. I found a book, The Question of Torture, CIA interrogation from the Cold War to War on Terror. The citation of this was about the quote was in this part where the CIA tortures are being applied to your children. Why wouldn't that be the torture applied to your children as a mandatory vaccine on a common cold, where zero are dying from COVID? No one dies from the coronavirus. Of course not. The common cold, don't be ridiculous. And yet you're watching a systemic imposition, like attack against your children. This is where we start to go now about the target that's involved here to genetically change your children and take away your right to say no, you slave animals. This is no different, the extortion of their life of any kind. As you see, the equal rights is that the United States will impose upon you, and the states being administrative agencies. Also, part you'll find in the CIA World Fact Book that states are administrative agencies of the federal. You'll see this go consistently. It makes no excitement to me to be able to see, no question, that this would be a CIA torture technique against your children. And here is the lineage of information, notwithstanding no cause. They don't care that there's no cause, because you don't care that there's no cause. Oh, I care. I care not to do anything. That's the point. I care to complain. That's the point. Keep complaining. Zero chance of dying. Mandatory vaccines. On vaccines, we know that's going to change their DNA. Synthesized change. The connection to the CIA torture techniques the kids are receiving is in a book. I got the link. You can read the part. It's, I think, page 41, 42, quoted out of the magazine or the article that they have there. I don't have the time to continue discuss it. I was going to go back through. It doesn't matter. It's there. What they're imposing on your kids is a CIA style. Whether or not it originates the CIA, someone learned it to impose it upon your little ones. And here we have evidence long before even I got that information. Reopening schools. First look inside an Arizona school model with partitions. Now this came out weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Many parents are wondering how schools will look different when they reopen in this fall. And there's more coming down here. You watch what's coming down. You watch what they're doing to your little ones. It's the future. We are our children's future. They are not our future. This is what I don't understand. It's a slogan that went through the school system. Oh, the children are our future. No, we're the children's future. Whatever we allow harm, we allow to them, will dictate their future, and we're gone. And so, for those of you who think you can sit back and do much of anything, especially if you have little ones, you really have to stop. You really have to reconsider what they're doing here. Reopening school, what's it going to look like? Pima County Superintendent's toured a charter school model Wednesday. When you look at the pictures, they've got plastic sheeting separating chairs that are separated by social distancing distances. They've got cubicles, if you will, separating all the kids that will come in to go to school anymore in Arizona. Now, what I've told you before, it became very clear to me in 2004 or so, 5. We live in an open-air prison, and it didn't matter where you think you live. You live in a cell the size that you've been allowed to live. If you don't have e-commerce, you're going to be living in the most open cell. It'll be on the street. But the cell you live in is your house. And if you don't abide and behave correctly, you're going to be put in a smaller cell. And if you yell and scream and you don't get out and put into the pod cell. You get stuck in your little cell, and if you yell, scream even louder, they'll put you in an even smaller cell. And that's what's going on here now. They're training your kids. These are torture techniques. Right? So you have an article that's telling you what your sons and daughters are going to be subjected to going into fall. I believe this is your license to, if you needed one, to say, I'm going to teach my sons and daughters on my own. I'm going to home school. But if you haven't seen this story, you need to see what the government's already, this is months old, already set up to do when your little ones get back. You think they're being traumatized? I had all kinds of stories to pull up. You think your kids are being traumatized right now? Yeah, you better bet they are. You wait till they start getting into the schools. And the prison cubicles are going to be made. And I responded to that. Thicker walls on your safety-sized 8-foot-high cubicle. Remember they talked about workplace reimaging? This is the anticipation of that. Prison workforce, prison industrial complex, public-private partnerships. This is all a Twitter thing I wrote way back May 13th. Podments, biominers. The Matrix is not a movie. They're telling you what they're going to do to your little ones. And you can sit back and say, oh, I'm not going to let them do it, I'm this and that. Once you resist, they're going to come after you because you you defied them instead of denying them, like I've been suggesting you'll need to do. The first thing you need to do, whether you know this or not and know how, you're going to need to keep them from being tortured through techniques that's been known to be implemented by the CIA, adopted by the education department nationally. How did they know to do that nationally? It can't be just because of a virus. And what do they want you to be? They want you locked in. They want your little ones genetically changed. They want you submissive. They want you beat down. They want to take away control because they are the future, but their future is not theirs. They are receiving the extremist exactions of every kind, and you're letting them. What you used to live in cubicles, they're now teaching your kids are going to be living in cubicles. That's how they'll learn. Oh, it's clear plastic right now, and then pretty soon they're going to find probably some problem plastic. They'll make walls. And that's going to be your life as a prisoner, controlled. See, it's a psychological training that starts in already. They're implementing it now. Now, what's this supposed to do? Keep track of you. So what do they have? Mass tracking, COVID pass, immunity passport slated to roll out in 15 countries. How does that happen globally, folks? If you don't think this is a big setup for the takedown, and as long as you're silent to it, it's going to continue, and your little ones are now you're seeing the little ones are the target for the future that is wanted for them. Through the magic of internet meme culture, most millennials have been familiar with the famous opening scene of the 1942 film Casablanca, where two policemen stop a civilian with the old Moorish section of Nazi-occupied French Morocco and ask him for his papers. The subject is taken away at once after failing to produce the required documents. The cinematic exchange has been used ever since as a popular reference to the ever-encroaching hand of the state, which is now on the verge of attaining a level of control over everyone's movement that puts the crude Nazi methods to shame. The little ones of the future will not understand what that paragraph said because they will wonder why. They won't even have to worry about the Nazi so-called asking for the papers. They will have a phone. They won't even know to question. That's only for your view today. COVID pass based on a fraud that no one outs. We see the future today. Right as I'm coming on today, 3 stories pop up. I had to add them in here late of where they're telling us this week this thing is going and planning and not stopping. Because none of you are stepping up to point out the fraud that they can't use a label to become an emergency to demand a thing. And or even if they could, the measures they're taking cannot stop that thing. Because that thing they're actually after is not the label that they're using as a stalking horse to take you out. BIS Innovation Hub, the gradual march to central bank digital currency continues to advance. While you're all locked down, doing whatever you know, or thinking you're out there protesting it, this thing is working through. It's going to go through the phones. Your digital currency will not be what you thought it was. It's going to be what this thing is based on all the stuff we've talked about, where your sons and daughters will be probably receiving, they'll be asking for this kind of technology. And it's getting worse. It's coming on us. Not only do you have mandatory vaccines now for Colorado, you now have, again, breaking this morning, controversial bill to microchip humans passed in Michigan. So again, for those of you in Michigan or anywhere not challenging the fraud that this so-called medical emergency that doesn't exist is doing, this is how fast they're using this to move this forward, to microchip people who in this country said, oh, who would do that? Now it's mandatory. Just like I told you, this was coming down to do in the way that they would be doing it. The Michigan House of Representatives has passed a controversial bill to microchip humans, you animals, you pest animals, no less. Voluntarily, they say here, in the state under the guise of protecting their privacy. Tell me when it stops making sense for you folks. And I'll tell you that you need to stop talking about how it's not making sense. Go figure out the sense it didn't make. Go find the principles it's violating and assert those against this nonsense that's bringing you right now and your little ones in the future into a very confined prison. The Microchip Protection Act would allow Michigan employers to use microchipping as their workers with their consent. However, research has shown that RFID transponders causes cancer. That's a secondary thing. They don't care. The other thing, workers with their consent. How far is that consent going to be withheld when your job is threatened? How far, folks? Not far at all. And this is what they're doing with you and the masks and the face coverings, and they're getting you to fight with businesses. The government's out of it, just like I told you was going to be the dynamic. And that is not something that you can fight with, something I've been telling you about. Not directly. The plan to microchip humans, you pest animals, is sponsored by Representative Brona Call, under the guise of protecting the privacy of workers. The stated objective of the bill is that it will protect the privacy rights of Michigan workers and promote further growth for job providers as it relates to microchipping, a cutting-edge technology on the rise that is increasing workplace, haven't heard that word term in a long time, workplace efficiency. So those of you that thought, oh, who's going to do that? Here, it's the law. To deny what I've been saying, they'll just make it the law. You can try to resist. You can position yourself that it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect me. I'm not going to be into that. But the population is the one that's now we're seeing, even if you believe differently, the population, the stupidity in the population will guide what you have to do or deny to you things that you need. And you may not have a cause of action against a third party that's not the government. And so here we have these right away. Now we're seeing it rolling out. All this stuff now, you can get microchipped. They're making it the law. They're bringing it as a benefit to workers, you slaves. Well, did I say that again? Have I said slave again? There's white slaves, there's black slaves, all kinds of slaves, folks. There's all kinds. It's a part of how this country is. The United States of America. The master-slave relationship is an employment contract. Go look it up. And as long as they have you thinking that's all there is and you don't understand, and this gets us over into taxes, how to keep yourself avoiding that jurisdiction so you don't have to evade it, then you're not quite getting it, and you will be brought into where you will be required. Right now it's voluntary. If they can do this, what stops them from making it mandatory, where you just saw Colorado make it mandatory? Despite the fact no child has died. No one has died from. And you wonder, well, how they get stuff through. Here it is. They're doing it right in front of your face. And how are they going to continue this? It's really fascinating to me. They're letting us know what that is. New bubonic plague cases send Mongolian region along Russian border on lockdown. You're saying, oh, okay, bubonic plague, it's over there. No, here's the point. And I find this all fast, all coming together. They're telling you they're moving quickly, and now they're going to also tell you and seal the deal. They will come up with a plague or anything at the drop of a hat to keep you in control or controlled, and to keep you having to have your COVID pass. For now, it'll be the bubonic pass, the plague pass. It'll be whatever thing that they've invented up pass, and you're going to have to be in compliance or you don't get. And they can just drop this anywhere. I'm not even questioning, did they have bubonic plague? It's never gone away. It's over there. This story told me was, this is how they drop down a plague wherever they want it, and you will comply, because you're not stopping the one you could stop now. You're not stepping up and saying, well, if you're going to declare something, you're going to have to prove it. In this case, there is no test. And why would there be? It's the common cold. Do you think when the government comes on and says you're going to be dying from the bubonic plague, you're going to have much of a statement to say against anybody around you and or the government? And then you're not in practice when the chips really start to come down to know what to do, how to act, instead of starting to learn behind the eight ball that's coming down on you, like so many people are doing. You're interested to go do this and you don't have a clue where to begin. That is not an educated society. That's not a people that can defend themselves. So here's the example today. I'm not worried about the bubonic plague over. I hope they figure it out. Bubonic plague has been in nature forever. You know they're digging this stuff up and making it. You know we got the genetic engineering. You know we've got the way to make CRISPR make it worse. And in a way they can't know, so they can honestly say, I don't know how that got in the world. But they can drop a plague or whatever anywhere and empower this control structure. And you're helpless. As I told you, the medical imperative would be the worst society could happen against societies, not just totalitarian, that could impose their authority without check, which has been proven by the governors imposing a medical emergency without an infectious agent, and nobody said anything. Just like China did. But we have some hope. Exclusive from General Flynn, if we don't act, 2% of the people who are about to control the other 98%. And so this is a discussion from General Michael Flynn, which on the first part of it was pretty inspirational at the point of someone knowing someone else is out there. We have to act, folks. We have to do something. He didn't say think about it, talk about it, chat about it. He goes, we have to do something about this. There's 2% of the people out there, this very minor group of people that are controlling the rest of us. And he comes out and says, I was once told if we're not careful, 2% of the passionate will control 98% of the indifferent 100% of the time. The more I've thought about this phrase, the more I believe it. There is now a small group of passionate people working hard to destroy our American way of life. Treason and treachery are rampant, and our rule of law and those in law enforcement professionals who uphold our laws are under the gun more than at any other time in history. These passionate 2% appear to be winning. And so here we have it. Inspired on the entrance, perfect. We need to get going. We got to stop this 2% that's messing us around. We've got to go do something about it. Then what does he do? He brings up the rule of law and law enforcement professionals upholding our laws. That's not my experience in the world, folks. I don't know about yours. And so where we start off, right off the bat, is a good opening sentence. This statement that we could be inspired by, in parts I can be inspired by it, that someone else is feeling the same way I do, actually brings us into a problem and diffuses our energy. He actually brings in that thing we talked about before within the government already, when someone referred to the children of light and the children of darkness. And for as much as I want to feel inspired by a general who understands what war is and how you protect yourself against invasions and all that, he automatically taints this discussion for me and brings in political views which we can tie to be foreign, whether he understands this or not. And it brings up my thought we really are in some trouble if we think we can look out to find people that have insight that we can reference. I'll reference that very first sentence. The rest of what he said, I literally had to stop and say, who is this guy? I was just on last week talking about how wrong he was done dirt. See, his being done dirt has nothing to do with what he's going to say, and this week he has something to say, and it's convoluted, actually. I appreciate the incitement that we need to do something, and I say do it properly to set the record, do things more intelligently than I've seen us do as oafs in the past. And yet he brings up this internal dialogue that's within the political realm to defeat this whole point. I guess for me, I'll take the good parts, I'll have to leave the bad parts, but I wonder, who are we as a people? The day is here, I've been talking about it. Your level of discernment is going to have to become so high that I'm wondering whether or not it's in us. We really were going to have to get some knowledge from external to this noise. For those of you that want to key into that. And then you have to discern that as well. This level of discernment is getting so high as to who we are going to believe, follow, take ideas from. I think for me, what ideas, who's out there doing stuff, and what's their game plan? What are they looking at? If I give all honesty to General Flynn and inspiration from what he's saying, he doesn't understand at least half the problem. And my problem with that is he's a general who's supposed to have seen most of all the problems. Otherwise, how does he defend against even the unknowns? At any rate, for as much as I was inspired as the first part, I wanted to give the guy here, great, you've won, you were done dirt, and you prevailed. From last week's story, I think it was. The oddness that what he had to come up with in order to do that, actually advocating for his abuser to stop abusing him, and the court didn't agree with that. You think the bar association's there not doing wrong, as we heard at the beginning of the broadcast. Absolutely wrong. He still prevails. He comes out to inspire us, and I see, wait a minute, now there's a whole lot of baggage in here. Even if, honestly, he doesn't see it, it's baggage for us as well. It's harm. It's stuff we can believe in, we can listen to, that actually taints our thoughts. As I explained, the child of light, child of darkness could very well be an inversion of what you're supposed to be listening for. And that sets our mental trap. And if we don't actively respond against it, that becomes a silent acceptance to everyone else that believes that that was an inspirational statement. And I tell you, I want to be inspired by people elsewhere as well. I want to know that we're a society of inspired people. And I'll go a little far in order to try and see if that'll happen for a long way, but once I started seeing duality in the statements, I have to say, whoa. So either I give all honesty to the guy, he doesn't know. For as high level as he was in the government, for as done dirt, he had the insight to know dirt was done and prevailed against the done dirt against him. He still has a failure of observation. And so, moving on, as we learn in these times that there are people that don't care about you, that could care less about what their words say, as long as they get you to buy in, and you become sedate. They don't care if they use that as a drug, an alcohol, something that they preoccupied your mind with, like they did in The Matrix, which is not a movie, so that you would feel discontent and focus on that discontent instead of where you were, what your condition was. European police hacked encrypted phones used by thousands of criminals. Getting back over to get you on the digital phone, get you into that technocratic control structure. We find out again that phones are were hacked by the police. Now, this is relevant to thousands of criminals, and criminals they may have been, so part of me says, okay, well, if they're criminals, even though this is before the fact of their judgments, if they're criminals, well, maybe, we need that check and balance. I don't know. I don't necessarily like the law enforcement, so I'm kind of feeling odd about this. My point here is not that they were doing it against someone's perceived criminality, is that your phone, this device that they're saying protects you, these microchips that are to protect you, that the government legislators have no idea about, are mandating upon you, are not foolproof, as been said by plenty of people, reminding us again, even something promoted as absolute security is absolutely vulnerable. And we're putting our lives and the lives of our little ones into the future, into this technocratic condition. One of the world's largest web tracking companies leaks tons of personal info from an unsecured server, if you think that Michigan is doing anybody any favors. And your silence is going to bring you into this condition. And so I don't really know, again, I got on the broadcast, I really had nothing more to say. I've said a lot of this over and over. I'm trying to show people how to take the information and become active, take it in their hands and do something to protect themselves. It seems that very few people will really want to do that. Notwithstanding, they'll wave the flag, they'll stand on the promises, whatever they'll do for the so-called Independence Day, they're clueless to the fact that none of them are independent. None of them are non-dependent. You're completely dependent on the extortion that's going to be put against you. And you agree with that. Fascinating to me. One of the world's largest web tracking companies leaks tons of information. That is your future. How to check your iPhone if it's secretly a coronavirus tracker. Well, you can check it. How do you know it's not? Okay, now that you know, what are you going to do about it? The whole system is moving into making you subject. IRS says it bought into location databases for millions of U.S. cell phones to track tax crime suspects. Who isn't a tax crime suspect, folks? You only have equal rights to be presumed guilty until you can prove yourself innocent and all the time being extorted against, because that's your equal right to all the other slaves. So says what? Me? The guy behind the woodshed? No. Look at Title 42, Section 1981. Pretty straightforward. The freedmen after the Civil War, the black men and women were freed. They were then invested with rights as a benefit to those of the rights of the white citizen. When you look that that's extortion, cannot be a country that says that you're an independent people of that extortion. And we have evidence all over that the thing that they're pushing you into, exclusive, massive spying on users of Google's Chrome shows new security weaknesses. These are old stories. The system they're putting you in so that you can't, if you don't have this, you will be thrown in the street. You won't have any due process at all. Is being imposed upon you and you're saying nothing. You criticize that I'm continually doing this and telling you how to do it, taking step-by-step points on what you can amass to stop this thing against you. And I don't see many people really caring that much, but I'm going to continue to say it, I hope, for a while, and I hope there's going to be more people listening. Maybe the youngsters will pick it up if they're not biologically changed. And Grimner, thank you for what you do over at Really Remedy and everybody else. Before my encoder goes off here, I'll shut off a little bit early and make sure we don't do this. But thank you very much. I'll be with you again if we can. I'll be with you next week. Tech Diffs, or Nature Willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of warpath.